It wasn't some heartfelt confession, some desperate plea. It wasn't even a phone call, it was a damn text message. 8 words. 8 goddamn words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Going on vacation with my lover. Bye, loser. Yeah, that's it. No. Tom, we need to talk. No, I'm sorry. Just, bye, loser. I stared at the screen, my phone practically glued to my hand. I was in Frankfurt at the time, on one of those ridiculous 6-month engineering contracts, away from home, grinding myself into dust for my family. Always for my family. I reread the text, then again, and again, hoping I'd somehow misread it. Maybe it was meant for someone else, a cruel joke? But deep down, I knew. I knew that tone, that cold, dismissive thing. That was Stacy. I was sending her $5,000 a month. $5,000 every single month. To cover bills, groceries, little luxuries, whatever she needed. And if she asked for more, I sent it. No questions asked. I thought I was being a good provider, a good husband, a good father. Turns out I was just an ATM. A walking, talking, emotionally stunted ATM. The worst part? The signs were there. Blazing red flags waving in my face, but I was too damn blind to see them. Or maybe I chose not to see them. My mom, bless her heart, never liked Stacy. She never said anything outright mean, but mothers know, that instinct, that sixth sense. She'd tried to warn me, pulled me aside, whispered, "Thomas, she's not right for you. You're too different. You need someone loyal." I blew it off. "Mom, you're just being overprotective." My friends too. They were more direct. "Hey, Tom, saw Stacy at O'Malley's last night, with some dude. Looked pretty cozy." Or, "She's been hitting up all these parties while you're gone, man. Just saying." I got defensive. "You're trying to cause trouble. You're jealous. And Stacy? She always had a way of twisting things around. You're just insecure, Tom. You can't stand to see me happy." And, like a complete idiot, I believed her. Because when I was home, between those soul-crushing work trips, everything seemed fine. Stacy was affectionate, even loving. We'd spend time with our son, little Leo. It felt normal. So I told myself everyone else was wrong, that they were stirring up drama for their own amusement. But the people who knew the truth best, my parents, Leo and Stacy were living with them while I was gone, and my mom, she didn't pull any punches. Stacy was going out all the time, leaving Leo with them for hours, coming home late, all dressed up like she was heading to a club. My dad, more reserved, would just say things like, "Son, maybe you should open your eyes a little bit." But I didn't want to. I didn't want to admit that I'd married someone who didn't give a damn about me. Hell, I loved her. I thought she was my forever. Then came the text. "Bye, loser." It felt like someone had punched a hole through me. A clean, brutal, devastating hole. And after the shock wore off, all that was left was rage. Years of my life, busting my ass, sacrificing everything for this woman, and she flushed it all down the toilet with a 4-word text message. I texted her back. "Okay, bye." Then a second text. "But kiss your money goodbye." The response was almost instantaneous. "No. Wait, let's talk about this. Don't do anything rash." Was she kidding me? She was the one sleeping around while I was halfway across the world. I wasn't going to sit around and let her call the shots anymore. I called the bank. I drained our joint account. Every single penny, almost 20 grand. Then I called my mom. Find any savings Stacy might have squirreled away. Secure them. It was time to cut her off. Completely. And I didn't feel guilty. Not one damn bit. She deserved everything that was coming. I booked the next flight home. I wasn't going to let this fester. I had to face it head on. Apologize to my mother for being such a blind, trusting fool, and finally put an end to this farce of a marriage. Stacy made her decision. Now, it was my turn. I barely slept on that red-eye back to the States. My head was a swirling vortex of anger, betrayal, and fear. What was I walking into? I imagined scenarios. Bursting into the house, catching Stacy off guard, maybe even throwing her stuff out on the lawn. I'm not usually the kind of guy who does things like that, but this wasn't normal. This was deeply, profoundly personal. When I landed, I went straight to my parents' house. My mom was waiting for me in the kitchen. She didn't say, "I told you so," but the look on her face said it all. I apologized, right there and then. Told her I should have listened, that she was right all along. She just nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and relief. "I'm just glad you're finally seeing things clearly, Thomas." But then things took a turn. My dad came in from outside. He had that serious, furrowed brow look he gets when he's about to drop a bomb. "Tom," he said, his voice low, "you're not going to like this." "What now?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Remember that guy Ethan, from high school? The one Stacy used to hang out with?" Ethan, vaguely. Tall, blonde, kind of a loser. Back then, anyway. "Yeah, why?" My dad sighed. "Apparently, she's been seeing him for months. He's the guy she went on that vacation with." I froze. Ethan? Ethan. Are you kidding me? The guy was a deadbeat then, and probably still is. I guess Stacy did have a type. People I paid money to, somehow. But my dad wasn't done. He dropped another one. "He's also been bragging around town about how he's going to marry Stacy after the divorce, and take you for all you've got." I almost laughed. It was too absurd. "He's planning on what?" "Yeah, word travels fast in a town like this. He talks like he's about to cash in on your life's work." That was it. That was the line. It wasn't just Stacy anymore. Now I had this 2-bit con man trying to lay claim to everything I'd worked for. Over my dead body, I told my parents to stay put. I needed to do something. Fast. First stop, the bank. To make absolutely sure everything was locked down. No chance for Stacy to pull any legal shenanigans. I also filed the paperwork to officially freeze our accounts and start the divorce process. Later that day, I was at the courthouse filling out the forms when I ran into Mike, an old friend. He'd known Stacy and me since high school. He pulled me aside looking worried. "Hey man, heard about what happened with Stacy?" "Yeah," I muttered. "She's a piece of work, isn't she?" Mike looked around like he didn't want anyone to overhear. "Listen, there's something you should know. Stacy's been seeing more than just Ethan." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She's been seeing a couple other guys. One of them is married, and his wife found out." "Wait. What? When did all this happen?" "The last few months. It's all coming out now that people know you're back in town." I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. How deep did this betrayal go? How many lies had she told? It was like every time I thought I had the whole story, another layer was peeled back, revealing more and more garbage. By the time I got back to my parents' house, my phone was blowing up with messages. From Stacy. She must have heard I was back because suddenly she was very eager to talk. "Tom, let's meet. We can work this out, please?" "Work this out?" "Yeah, sure." The only thing I wanted to work out was how fast I could get her the hell out of my life. But I decided to let her come back. Not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I wanted her to see what she'd lost. I wanted her to walk into that house and face me, my parents, and the reality of what she'd done. She showed up 5 days later, strutting in like she hadn't just detonated our entire marriage. But the moment she saw me standing there with my parents, her confidence cracked. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, "It's over, Stacy. You're done here." I expected tears, begging, some kind of dramatic scene. But instead, she just folded her arms and said, "Fine, but don't take all the money." I smiled. "Oh, I already did." Her face paled. "Wait, what?" "Yeah, Stacy, the accounts are empty. You won't get a dime from me. Good luck with Ethan. Maybe he'll support you now." That's when she lost it, screaming about how I had no right, how I was being unfair. My dad, who'd been quiet until then, finally spoke up. "You need to get out of here, girl. You're not welcome in this house anymore." She snapped at him, but it didn't matter. She knew she had no choice. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more surreal, she dropped a bomb. "You can keep the baby," she said. "You can keep the baby." Those words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My mom gasped. "Excuse me? You're giving up your own son?" Stacy shrugged like it was no big deal. "I need to find myself. I can't be tied down anymore." And with that, she grabbed her bags and walked out the door, without looking back. After she was gone, after that door slammed shut, leaving her own flesh and blood behind like an unwanted piece of luggage, I stood there in stunned silence. My mother, however, wasn't so quiet. She muttered under her breath, "Good riddance." My father didn't say much either. He just shook his head, grabbed a beer, and walked out into the backyard. That was his way of dealing with stress. Sit outside, drink a beer, and let it all sink in. Meanwhile, I felt like I'd been dropped into a bad soap opera. I mean, who does that? Casually abandon their kid and walk out of a marriage like it's no different from returning a pair of shoes that didn't fit? My head was still spinning when I heard my son's footsteps upstairs. He was only 5, too young, thank God, to understand the full extent of the chaos that had just unfolded. I didn't want him to see me like this, angry, confused, and heartbroken. So I took a deep breath and went to check on him. He was playing with his action figures, completely unfazed. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound normal. "Are you hungry? Grandma's making dinner soon." "Yeah," he chirped, completely oblivious. I envied his innocence. For the rest of the evening, I focused on him, pretending that everything was fine, but deep down, I knew I had to get my act together. And fast. Stacy was gone, and I had to figure out what life was going to be like now, for both of us. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sat down with my parents. The weight of what had happened settled on me like a physical burden. "I don't even know where to start," I confessed, running a hand through my hair. "Just breathe, son," my dad said, his voice calm. "We're here. We'll help you figure it out." My mom squeezed my hand. "Leo's going to be okay. He has us, and he has you. That's what matters." They were right. Leo was the priority. Everything else could wait. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Stacy wasn't the type to just disappear quietly. She'd be back, in some form or another, and I had to be ready for her. The next morning, the phone rang. It was my attorney, David. "Tom, we have a problem," he said, right off the bat. "Great," I sighed. "What now?" "Stacy has already contacted a lawyer. She's claiming that you emptied the joint account illegally. She's threatening to file a lawsuit if you don't give back at least half the money." I almost laughed. Illegally. She sent me a text message saying she was leaving me for her lover and going on vacation with him. Doesn't that count for something? "Unfortunately, it's not that simple," David explained. "She can claim abandonment, but unless you have solid proof that she was unfaithful and misused funds, she might have a case." Proof. That word stuck in my head. Proof. I had to stop playing defense and start building my case. That's when it hit me. Mike, and the others, everyone in town knew what Stacy was up to. People had seen her with Ethan at clubs, at parties, sneaking around. And Mike had mentioned other guys too. If I could get witnesses to back me up, I'd have the proof I needed to shut her down legally and protect myself financially. That afternoon, I decided to pay Mike a visit. He lived a few blocks away, so I drove over and knocked on his door. When he opened it, he gave me a look like he'd been expecting me. "Tom, man, are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted, "but I need your help. You said Stacy was seeing other guys besides Ethan. I need names, dates, anything you've got." Mike scratched the back of his head and hesitated. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this mess, but yeah. There are things that people have seen. I can talk to some people and see if they're willing to go on the record." "Thanks, Mike. I really need this. She's trying to take me to court for money she doesn't deserve." He nodded. "I get it. You don't deserve that crap." We talked for a while, and before I left, Mike dropped another bomb on me. "Hey, just a heads up. Ethan's been telling people that Stacy's planning on coming after you hard. Apparently, he thinks he's got the upper hand because she's going to get custody of your kid if things get ugly." I froze. "What? She doesn't even want him. She just said she's done with family life." "Yeah, well, she might change her mind if it means getting more money in court. Ethan's probably pushing her to do that." That lit a fire in me. Stacy could try whatever she wanted, but there was no way I was going to let her use my son as a pawn just to milk me for more money. I had to get ahead of this, and fast. Later that night, I sat down with my mom and dad to discuss the situation. My dad, in his usual laid-back way, said, "Don't let her scare you, son. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. You've been supporting her for years while she's been running around behind your back. Courts aren't stupid." "Still," I said, "I have to cover all my bases. If she comes after me, I need to be ready." My mom chimed in, "You have the truth on your side, Tom, And this town is too small for her lies to stand up. People know what she's done, they just need to get the facts. She was right, the truth was my biggest weapon, and I needed to use it. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and whispered conversations. I felt like a private investigator in a cheesy detective novel, except this was my life, and the stakes were terrifyingly real. Mike came through. He found a couple of friends who were willing to testify about Stacy's infidelity. One of them even had photos from a party where Stacy was making out with Ethan in front of everyone. Not exactly subtle. On top of that, I found out that Stacy had been borrowing money from people all over town, money that she hadn't paid back. It seemed like every new piece of information painted her as more reckless and irresponsible than I'd ever imagined. I started keeping a detailed log of everything: dates, times, names, amounts of money, every little detail that could potentially help my case. I even hired a private investigator to dig into Stacy's finances and track her movements. I felt like a crazy person, but I couldn't take any chances. But the biggest twist came a week later. I got a call from Stacy's attorney. Apparently, Stacy had completely backed down from her custody threat. She knows she doesn't have a chance, the lawyer said, his voice sounding almost apologetic, but she's willing to settle everything out of court, on her terms. What were those terms? I was about to find out. My stomach churned with anticipation. A few days after I heard that Stacy wanted to settle, I got a phone call directly from her. I almost didn't answer it, but curiosity got the better of me. She wasted no time with pleasantries. "Tom, we have to stop this nonsense," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Let's be adults and work out an agreement. You can't keep all the money. We were married." "I'm entitled to some." I laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "You're entitled? You texted me that you were leaving me for your lover and went on vacation with him. You abandoned our son like a piece of luggage. Now you want me to just hand over cash like none of this ever happened?" Her voice grew cold. "It's called divorce, Tom. I could take you to court, and it would get ugly for both of us." "Go ahead," I shot back. "You'd lose. I have witnesses, evidence, and the truth on my side. Do you really want to air your dirty laundry in front of everyone?" There was a pause. She hadn't expected me to be so prepared. Finally, she muttered, "I don't want to fight. I just want what's fair." "You had your chance to be fair," I said, my voice hard. "Now you get nothing. We're done here." I hung up and blocked her number. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was in control. I had gathered the evidence. I had the support of my family and friends, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine: my son, my future, and my peace of mind. The next morning, I met with David to finalize our case strategy. We filed for full custody of Leo and made sure Stacy had no legal claim to any more money. She didn't even have a job, and I wasn't going to let her live off me forever. A week later, things escalated. Stacy and her boyfriend Ethan tried one last desperate stunt. Ethan showed up at my parents' house and banged on the door. I wasn't home at the time, but my dad was. From what he told me later, Ethan was ranting and raving, screaming nonsense about how Tom can't win, and "we're gonna take him to court." My dad didn't flinch. He opened the door, looked Ethan dead in the eye, and said, "You come back here again, and you'll regret it." Then he calmly slammed the door in his face. Ethan didn't try anything after that. I guess he finally realized his little intimidation game wasn't going to work. After that, things started moving quickly. Stacy must have realized that the walls were closing in on her, because she didn't put up much of a fight when the divorce papers were served. She didn't fight for custody either. She just signed the papers, as if she wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible. When I talked to David after the settlement was finalized, he was as surprised as I was. "She could have dragged this out longer," he said, "but I guess she knew she didn't stand a chance." Good. I was done with her games. I made sure everything was in writing: no alimony, no claims on future earnings. Stacy was officially out of our lives. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Stacy and Ethan had broken up. Apparently, things had gone south between them when the money dried up. She wasn't living in some fantasy anymore. She was back in reality, broke and scrambling to get by. Part of me thought she'd come crawling back, trying to rekindle something, but she didn't. Not even once. I guess she knew there was no point. I was done, and she had burned every bridge she could think of. My focus shifted completely to Leo. I wanted to give him the stability and happiness he deserved. I quit my overseas job and found work closer to home. My parents helped out a lot, and for the first time in years, I felt grounded. One night, as I was tucking Leo into bed, he looked up at me and said, "Daddy, are we going to be okay now?" I smiled and stroked his hair. "Yeah, buddy, we're going to be okay." And we were. We were finally going to be okay. A few months after the dust settled, I thought I'd heard the last of Stacy. I didn't keep track of her, and honestly, I didn't care where she ended up. But of course, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. I was at the grocery store picking up milk and bread when I ran into Jenny, one of Stacy's old friends. We hadn't talked much before, but now she seemed eager to share some gossip. "Hey Tom, I hear you're doing great with Leo. That's great," she started, all smiles and polite small talk. Then she leaned in, like she was about to drop some juicy news. "Did you hear about Stacy?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, I haven't. What about her?" Jenny snorted. "She's living with some guy now, some interesting character she met a few weeks after Ethan dumped her. Apparently they're crashing in some rundown apartment across town." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Really? Well, I guess she's still finding herself, huh?" "Yeah," Jenny grinned. "But here's the kicker. She's been asking people for money. She told me she's struggling and might have to leave town soon." She paused for dramatic effect. "Oh, and she mentioned you. Said she was going to try to ask you for help." I burst out laughing. "Good luck with that," I said, shaking my head. Sure enough, a week later, I got an email from Stacy. I hadn't blocked her, although I probably should have. It was a long, rambling message about how things hadn't worked out with Ethan and how she was now living with a guy named Manuel. She claimed she was trying to turn her life around, but needed some temporary financial assistance. She said it would help her get back on her feet, and implied that it was the least I could do since we shared a history. I didn't respond. I didn't even think about it. A few days later, my mother called me. "Guess who called me today?" she said, clearly amused. "Let me guess. Stacy?" Bingo. She's got some nerve. She asked if I could loan her a few thousand to support her new life. I told her, "Honey, you made your choices. Now you live with them." "And she didn't take it well?" I asked. "Nope," my mom said, laughing. "Good for her. She doesn't deserve any sympathy." From then on, Stacy was just a name in my past. She had no power over me, my family, or my son. We had everything: stability, happiness, and peace. Leo was thriving, surrounded by love and support. We built a life without her, and it was better than anything I could have imagined during those dark days. As for Stacy, word around town was that she had moved out of state not long after her attempts to beg for money failed. Last I heard, Manuel had left her too, but that wasn't my problem anymore. She was just a chapter of my life that I had finally closed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Really free.